Hello again. In this video, we are going to talk about the S and the Z sound. So a common question I get is, how do I know if the letter S in an English word should be pronounced as an S, or Z, Z? Should it be voiceless S or voiced Z? So let's go through this today and help you understand that a little bit more. So this is a common mistake for many of my Spanish or Portuguese speakers. So instead of saying these, I'm hearing these. And instead of saying is, I'm hearing is. Instead of busy, I'm hearing busy. Instead of cousin, I'm hearing cousin. Instead of music, I'm hearing music. Okay, so that getting that voiced Z sound tends to be a little bit more difficult for these Spanish and Portuguese speakers. So if that's you, then this lesson is definitely for you so that you can get that voice on for those Z sounds. And a lot of it is just not knowing when to use the Z sound versus the S. Okay, so that's what we're going to go through today. So let's talk about the rules. When do we know if an S has more of that light Z sound to it? So two situations here. When the S follows a vowel, then we're going to get that Z sound. This happens a lot in American English, so you're going to come across this quite a bit. And when the S follows a voiced consonant, then you're going to get that Z sound. So some examples of this. Most of plural words are going to have that Z sound at the end. Boys, shoes have that vowel before the S. And then words like observatory have that voiced consonant and then the S right after, so that's going to get that Z, that voiced sound to it. So unfortunately, there are many exceptions to these rules. It makes it quite a difficult thing to get, but in the worksheets, we go through a lot of these words that should be Z sounds and exceptions and things like that. So go through the worksheet so you can practice those words that have that Z sound. All right, the rules. So let's continue to go through the rules. So we talk about heteronym words in the Pronunciation Pro course. And that's when you have a word that can be pronounced two different ways depending on what manner of speech it is, if it's a verb or a noun. Okay? In most situations, when a word is a verb and has an S sound in it, it's going to be a Z sound. And when it's a heteronym word and it has an S in it and is a noun, it's going to have the S. So let's go through some examples of this. So something like use and use. Okay? I'm going to use these scissors, and these scissors have no use. Okay? House and house. We will house the foreign exchange students, and house, this is my house, is that noun version form. Close, please close the door, and the game was very close. Excuse, please excuse me, and he gives a lot of excuses. Excuse. That's not a good excuse. Diffuse. Please diffuse the situation. And diffuse. I actually don't know exactly how to put that into a sentence. Diffuse. I've never used that. I haven't used that very often. Okay, diffuse. Okay, here are some situations where their spelling is a little different, but it's kind of that same root word. So advise, please advise your students, and please give me some advice. Glaze, glazed the cake, and glass. It's made of glass. Lose, we are going to lose the game, and that was a big loss. Choose, please choose your teammates, and this is a good choice. Okay, so some of those words that are similar to each other, but to make it clear whether it should be a Z or an S sound. So let's practice. I wanted to practice some of these words that have that Z sound. So like I said, some of my Spanish and Portuguese speakers, it's just a matter of learning how to turn on that voice for that Z, for those S sounds that should be Zs. Okay, so a lot of times it's confusing because you see an S sound, you want to do an S sound, but it's actually a Z sound, and even just turning on your voice tends to be difficult. So let's go through some practice words so that you can get those correct. All right, really turn on that voice. Okay, remember with those voice sounds, we're going to get that vibration in the throat. Zzz. Okay, so we got to really turn on that voice. If it seems too much right now, like you're overdoing it, that's good. That's how we want to practice so that you're really getting that Z sound strong. When you're in conversation, it won't be as strong. But here in practice, we want to really overemphasize it. So here are 30 very common words in American English, about 30. All right, let's go through them together. Has, is, was, and kind of push that Z sound so you get that emphasis. As. So this is an important one because if you don't do the Z sound, it sounds like ass. Okay, so you really need to get that Z sound on it. Goes. And this one can sound like ghost. Again, that T, there is that T at the end. But if you don't get that Z sound, it can tend, in connected speech, it can sound like ghost. Okay, so goes. Says. Very common in English. How about these? Those. Shoes. Now, some common days of the week. Thursday. Okay, really emphasize that and get that Z sound in there. Thursday. Tuesday. Wednesday. And we don't do Wednesday. Wednesday is kind of the pronunciation there. It's not that D sound. Wednesday. Okay, let's do a few more. Because. Mrs. So that first S in the pronunciation, the first S gets the S sound, the last S gets the Z. Mrs. Versus Miss is just going to be the S sound. Mrs. Smith is going to have that voiced. Busy. Chosen. Now, a lot of these contractions have this. So, doesn't, wasn't, isn't, and he's. So, he's, she's, those have that Z sound. How about this one? Cousin. Desert. Dessert. Deserve. Sometimes with the D, if the D isn't sounding quite clear, it can sound like the surf. Deserve, the surf. Okay, deserve. And then easy. Okay, one more set here. Supervisor. And again, we're overemphasizing these because I really want you to practice turning on that voice. Supervisor. Nose. Okay, which is going to be the same pronunciation as nose, like he knows everything. nose. Plays, plays. If you don't get that Z at the end, it's going to sound like place, place, okay? Plays, plays. News, news. Again, if you don't get that Z sound, it's going to sound like noose, noose, which is something that's wrapped around your neck. News, noose. All right, president, president. Has that Z sound for president. If you don't do the Z, it sounds like precedent, precedent, which is a totally different word. Different meaning, it can get confused. All right, husband, husband. Music, music. Raisin, raisin. It can sound like racin or racing if you can't, if you don't pronounce that Z. And then reason, reason. All right, so we have a lot of other practice words in the worksheets. We also have sentences and paragraphs with a lot of these most common words so that you can get that practice of putting it together, not just in the word, but how do I connect it into sentences and then also in reading, and then you can move it into conversation. But until you practice it at these lower levels, you're not going to be able to get it in conversation. Okay, it does take consistent practice at these word, sentence, paragraph levels before you get to conversation. So it just takes some time. All right, so let's review the rules a little bit again. So S has more of a light Z sound when the S follows a vowel or when the S follows a voiced consonant. Okay, so examples: boys, shoes, observatory. And then there's, exceptions to that. All right, some other rules we have with the heteronym words. Okay, if it's a verb, it's going to have a Z sound. If it's a noun, it's going to be an S sound. So we have all these examples that we went through. We won't go through them again. But words that are spelled the same but pronounced differently depending on if it's a verb or a noun. Okay, so I hope that helps you get more comfortable with that S and Z sound. So in the worksheets, we have a lot of examples of words that have an S sound in it, but are pronounced as Z sounds, so that you can get comfortable with those. We also have sentences and paragraphs for you to practice. Now, I have found with my students that it just takes that practice. You have to get comfortable with those words and those sentences and those paragraphs, because like I showed you, if you're not pronouncing with the Z, a lot of times it can become a whole different word, and we don't want to have that confusion. So to be clear, to really be clear in your pronunciation, we have to make sure that we're getting those Z sounds when it's appropriate. So go practice the worksheets, and I'll see you again in the next video.